Hi everyone, I hope everybody's well. I just thought I'd pop by and create a card. It's actually my anniversary today, and I just thought, well, I fancy just creating a card just for the sake of creating a card, because I just want to be creative for an hour and I've got no plan. The only plan I've got is which stamp set I'm using, so I've done no prep. So I think sometimes it's nice to see the fact that I've done no prep, just to see where I'm going. Now let me show you sometimes how I work. So I found this on my craft room floor. So I think it's 3.5 by 7 inches. Yes, it is. It's 3.5 by 7 inches. I measured it. And this was on the floor, obviously, from when I've previously cut different cards. And I thought, well, let's not waste it. Let's use it in what I'm going to make today. So it's going to be a quick card. It's maybe nothing new. It might be something new for you, but I'm just going with the flow. I'm just going with, I fancy being creative, so I'm just going with it. So what I'm using is, I picked 2 colours, and I didn't want to do anything sort of too dark, so I picked 2 colours that I haven't used for a while. So I've picked Bundled Sage and Speckled Egg. So I thought I'd use those 2 colours of Distress Oxide inks. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach over for my spritzer bottle. There's always something that you don't get when you decide to do something off the cuff. When you decide to do something off the cuff, there's always something you need to reach for. So what I've done here is I've cut this card slightly smaller so that it's going to fit on that card blank that I found on the floor. So I just cut this slightly smaller. So I think it's 3.25 inches in width and something like 6.75 inches in length. So 6.75 inches by 3.25. So it's a strange measurement because I'm just going with what I found on the floor, and sometimes it's nice to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide ink all over my, in fact, I don't want it over this acrylic block. It's just dawned on me. So this is the way it goes. It's not the right acrylic block. I want a narrower acrylic block. I've just decided I want a narrower one. So we're just going to move that out the way. Just give that a clean, and I'm going to use a narrower acrylic block. I've just decided. So, and as I said, this is going with the flow, so I'm literally going with wherever inspiration takes me. I'm going to use this narrower acrylic block. So what I'm going to do is do the same, apply the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide ink over the acrylic block. And I'm sort of smooshing the ink. I'm smooshing the ink over the acrylic block. I'm just smooshing that. And if you think that you've obliterated some of the colour, just because you're using the Distress Oxide inks, you can layer the colour over the top. And for me, that looks a lovely, lovely colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I spritz that with water, so we'll just put that acrylic block out the way. I'm just going to use some infusions, or you can use your Brush-Os. I'm just going to use infusion slime, and I'm just going to put a little bit in my little palette, and then just spritz that with water. Just bring this up so you can see I'm spritzing it with water, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my acrylic block back into display. Let's move these out the way. And what I'm going to do is find something to tap I'm going to pick up. I'm trying to keep everything in view, and sometimes it's very difficult. So I'm just going to add some splatters of the slimed. So this is the slimed Brush-Os. Just add that to it, and then we can just move that out the way, just so you can see what we've got here. So I'm just going to wipe up a little bit of my mess, just so that our card doesn't get in too much of a mess. Just so that we keep some kind of order, which is very rare when it comes to Tracy Evans. So what I'm going to do is now just give this a light spritz with water, like so. And then I'm just going to dry underneath because there's some moisture underneath. And can you see I've got a lovely element of colour there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, and then I'm going to apply this to my white card. So I'm just going to place this down the centre of my white card. And I love the fact that you can see what's happening underneath. And I'm not going to press too hard, because if you press too hard, it's going to seep out of the sides, and I don't want that. So I'm just allowing that to sit on the card for a few moments, just like so. Just allow it to sit, and then I can lift this up, and I've got a beautiful background. And I love these little breaks of white that we've got. And what we can do is just grab a scrap of card. Just grab a scrap of card. This is just one that's on the floor again. And what you can do is you can take that piece of card, bring this into the photograph, into the camera, and then you can also add, this is just what's left over. You can just add the leftovers to your extra piece of card. And look at the backgrounds you get. You can spritz with water again. So you've got this background, you can spritz with water again and just lay it back over just to see if there's anything else left on there now that you've spritzed with water. And can you see that you've still got a lovely background? So I could probably get a 3rd generation print from that. And all we've done is used a little bit of ink, an acrylic block and some water. And you've got 2 lovely backgrounds. Can you see? Just lovely backgrounds. And I'm just going with the flow. And it's got quite a mossy feel to that, I think. Quite a mossy feel. I'm just going to plug my heat gun in, because I literally walked upstairs and thought, what am I going to create? And at that spur of the moment, I decided I was going to do a video. So everything's happening real time. So I'm just going to give that a dry. Now what I would do is, if you weren't doing a video and you weren't on camera, I would allow this to dry naturally. And the reason, I'd allow this to dry naturally is that you would get these darker areas that dry darker naturally. But obviously when you force dry something, it forces the colour down into the card, and therefore it washes that colour out a little bit. But obviously for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to dry anyway, just for the purpose of the video. And I do love these mossy colours that I've got. Really lovely. Just a nice different colour change. And I have to say, the speckled egg with the bundled sage is a beautiful colour scheme. Absolutely love it. Really love it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dab that little bit like so. Just dab that dry. Just give that another dry, because obviously if I don't dry it, I'm not going to be able to stamp onto my substrate. It won't be dry enough. So I do need to make sure that that wet ink is dry. Turn your card over just so it flattens out a little bit. So turn it over. I'm using 300 GSM smooth white card. This is Centura Pearl, but I often use Pink Frog as well. So whichever card is your preference. But look at the colours in that. Doesn't it look quite mossy? Oh, I just love it. I think it's just a lovely, lovely colour. So what I'm thinking of using is, I'm thinking of using this stamp set 276, which is nibs and mushrooms. And I just thought this mushroom one, I haven't used this for a bit. And if I'm honest, in my group, I've got a little group on Facebook, and it's under Tracy Evans Create, Inspire, Share. And in the group, quite a few ladies and gentlemen have been using this stamp set. And I thought, you know, I haven't used it for a while, so I'm going to use it this time. So that's why I've decided to use that stamp set. Just reaching over for my acrylic block, because this is the reason I got this larger acrylic block out in the first place, is to put my stamp set on. So just take my stamp set, just add this. You see, and now I'm thinking, do I want it stamped in black or do I want it stamped in grey? This is what I'm like all the time when I'm first starting something, you see, because this is going to go on here like this. So I'm just deciding whether I want black or grey. I'm just going to reach for my grey ink pad, because as I said, we're doing this live, so I'm literally reaching for products as we go. So I think I might stamp this in a grey colour. Hopefully it should be dark enough. It should be dark enough for our project. Just move that card. So I'm using VersaFine Claire Morning Mist. So I'm using Morning Mist. I just think it'll be a little bit softer because it's a grey, but it'll still give me that detail. So I'm just going for a little bit softer than black. So just move this out the way. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep everything in camera while you're concentrating as well. And then I've got a wire in the way as well. So I think I'm just going to place it here like so. I think I'm going to go, do you like how I'm sort of umming and ahhing? No, I think I'll just bring it a little bit lower. That's it. Just a little bit lower. And sometimes it's nice just to take your time, and that's all I'm doing. I'm taking my time just to think and plan what I'm doing. And I'm just allowing that ink to sit. I'm allowing the ink to sit because I'm stamping onto a damp substrate, because I use that water with the oxides, and obviously however much you dry that card, if you're not letting it dry naturally, then there will be some moisture in that card. So we just allow this ink to sit, just give it a light press, allow this ink to sit, and then you can lift your acrylic block, because I'm using the All in Create acrylic blocks, so I can lift just to make sure I get all the areas. And all as I do is I keep this hand in place and I just press over the whole area like so, just pressing over the whole area, and I never remove my hand from the acrylic block until I'm sure that I'm happy. You see, and that, because it's in the grey, I don't know about you, but I think that's a little bit more subtle, a little bit more natural feel to it because it's in the grey, and I just love that. So I'm just going to give that a little dry. Now, if you don't want to dry with the heat tool, what you can do is you can just take a piece of copier paper and just blot, just to make sure that this ink is dry. As you can see, there's a little bit of ink there, but nothing major. So what I'm thinking now is I can just add a little bit of colour. So let's just move this on one side. And I could stamp the mushrooms again, because I could stamp, as you can see, I've got this little bit of card here. So I could use this background to add some dimension to a couple of the mushrooms, which is perfect. Just what we need for a bit of stamping. That's why I always do a second generation print. I always do a second generation print. But can you imagine this with a flower on the side? I could just, you see, that seems a shame to waste it, doesn't it? I might just save that. I might just save that and grab another piece of card. Let's grab another piece of card like so, and let's go for another inking on this spare piece of card. It just seems a shame to use that other one. Maybe I should do another video with that scrap piece of card that I've got left. Maybe do another video with that and see what we can do with the flower. Just think it seems a shame just to waste it personally. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another background just with the colours, not with the infusions, just with the colours, just so I can stamp those mushrooms, yet again. Just look at that colour, just wonderful. And you can just dab, because you just want this card just to create a coloured backdrop, just to add your stamped images to. So I'm just going to give that a dry. This is just so I can stamp a couple of those mushrooms. I'm just going with the flow. I'm just thinking as I'm creating the card. So again, obviously if I was not on camera, I would let that dry naturally, because then you'd get the darker indulations here, there and everywhere. So, but you can still see, even with that bit of water, how the oxides oxidize. It's just beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stamp again. And this time, what I'm thinking is I just want to highlight these two mushrooms here. So I'm just going to stamp those two mushrooms. Let's just move these out of the way so we can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to stamp these two mushrooms with the grey. And I have to say, the Morning Mist VersaFine Clair ink pad is a beautiful colour. So I'm just going to ink that up, and I'm just going to stamp these on here like so. The thing is, I find sometimes when I'm just having a play, I end up with little bits and pieces everywhere because I end up with lots of backgrounds. So just pressing that just to add the two mushrooms. Look at them. Don't you think they just look lovely? Just think they're fab. And I'm just going to blot just to make sure that I've got no extra ink just as I cut them out. And I'm just reaching for things, just bring in the first piece that we were doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this little mushroom now. Just cut this out. And I love how around the mushroom, there's actually a touch, it looks like a touch of shading. So that automatically gives depth to your mushrooms, which I quite like. So just cutting round the mushrooms, and I think I'm going to cut round them together. So we're just cutting round these mushrooms, and I'm doing everything live. Obviously when you see the video it'll be pre-recorded, but I'm actually creating everything as I'm doing it. So in other words, I've not done any prep. So I'm just cutting these mushrooms out just to give me some depth to the first stamped images. And they're lovely to cut out. And I've actually got a border stamp that's got this same mushroom on, but in a much larger size. So you could use all of them together, which would be quite handy. So there we go. We've got a couple of mushrooms here, just to give me a little bit of depth. So they will go over the top like that, just to give me a little bit of depth. And what we can do now is let's add a little bit of shading to all of the mushrooms. So what I'm going to do, this is a bit dangerous actually colouring while I'm doing a video, but I'm actually going to add a touch of shading just to the mushrooms, just to give it a little bit of colour. And I'm using my Polychromo pencils. I'm using the Polychromo ones. And with the Polychromo ones, what you're supposed to do if you're a professional colourist, I mean, I'm not a professional colourist, but what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to add light layers of the colour and build up the colour. You're not meant to just scribble and rush adding the colour. You're supposed to add light layers and build up the depth. So I'm just going to spend a few moments. Obviously, when I'm in video, you don't want to just watch me colouring. So I'm just going to build up a little bit of depth. So we'll build up a little bit of depth on these as well, the ones that we've cut out. So I'm just adding a little bit of shading. And I just think these mushrooms are so lovely. There's just something about them, just the natural feel. And if you've got my snail stamp, you could also add the snails to them as well. That's what I like about the stamps. And when I'm designing, I always try to ensure that, you know, some of the stamps will work together. So that if you've got several from my range, then they'll all work together. You're not just ending up with one stamp that's a one-trick pony. They all work together. So I'm just adding a little bit of shading to my mushrooms. And I'm just taking my time. Obviously, I can't take my time as much as I'd like to. If I was not on video, then I would spend a lot longer building up the depth to this, just to give it a little touch of shading. So it's lovely. And if you are in my group, look out for some of the designs that some of the ladies and gentlemen have done in the group. They've done some fantastic designs. They're so clever. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness just to the top edge, just a little bit of darkness. and I tend to use a flicking motion. I think that's more of a habit, to be honest, for me. I just like using a flicking motion. I tend to find that if I use a flicking motion, I use a lighter touch. If I crayon or colour, crayon, I'm talking like I'm back at school, but if I colour, I always find it easier to add a lighter touch if I use a flicking motion. That's just a personal thing. We've all got our little quips and habits. So I add a little bit of a darker touch to the top using that flicking motion. It just works best for me. Obviously, you'll have ways that work best for you as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that lighter colour a bit more. I also find with the flicking motion, my hands don't ache as much when I'm colouring. I think, again, that's just a personal thing. But I do love how with the polychromos or whatever pencil crayons that you're using, it adds wonderful depth. It adds wonderful depth to your design. And it just adds a touch of shading. It just adds a little bit more interest to your whole design, your whole card. I just think it adds a different element to that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that over the top. It's not much dimension, but it just adds enough dimension for me. And as I said, because I'm live, I'm reaching for everything because I've not done any prep. So I'm just reaching for my adhesive. Just reaching for my adhesive, which what we have to do now is we have to hope that my adhesive, because it hasn't been tested, works. Just make sure that the bottle shakes and that we don't shake the camera. So we can just add a little bit of adhesive just down the edge, like so, just down the edge. And I'm just going to add this like so. Whoops, whoops, there we go. You just need to hold the thin pieces in place a little bit just so the adhesive takes hold. And I hope you can see that on camera. That little bit of pencil crayon just adds a touch of shading. I just love the touch of shading. Nice and simple, nothing too complicated. Now I'm just going to test. I've got some cheesecloth here. Well, I've got a bit of everything here actually. But I've got some cheesecloth here. I haven't used cheesecloth for a long time. So what I'm thinking is if I can cut a long piece. Let me just get my fabric scissors. So if I can cut a long piece. Why is everything so difficult to get hold of when you... So I'm just going to cut a long piece. I'm not measuring or anything like that. I must admit, I know a lot of people, they like to measure everything. I must admit, I don't measure. I just hope for the best. So I'm not measuring this, I'm just cutting. You probably can't see it all on camera, but this is my cheesecloth. So I've got no idea if it will look right, but I'm just taking a piece of cheesecloth. Let's move that out the way. Let's just, and what I'm going to do is take my ink pads. So my bundle, let's just do it with speckled egg. Let's just move this out the way. I'm just going to take my speckled egg like so. Just give that a spritz with water, my speckled egg, and just see if it'll pick up some of the colour of the speckled egg just onto the cheesecloth. Obviously bits of your cheesecloth, which is lovely, are just going to fall off because that's what they do. So I'm just picking up the colour on that cheesecloth like so. And obviously you're going to get into a bit of a mess because you're picking up ink, and then just dab off the excess. And then what you can do is just dry this. Just dry your cheesecloth, and you can stretch the cheesecloth as well, so you can stretch the fibres. So I'm just giving this a dry. Just grab it in your hand, just give it a little dry. Let's add some of that bundled sage, just so that we can colour it a little bit more. Add some of that bundled sage. I have to say, I'm a convert to bundled sage. I think bundled sage is lovely. Really lovely colour. So pick up some of that bundled sage with your cheesecloth, like so. Do you like how much mess I'm making? I think it's good. Look, do you like the size of my cheesecloth? My cheesecloth looks like nothing now. Looks a tiny bit of cheesecloth. So I'm just going to have to dry that. But I have to say I'm loving these colours. And sometimes I forget that I'm on camera and that I need to keep it in so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just drying that. Just drying this. And what you can do with the cheesecloth is you can stretch it a little bit. You can stretch the fibres so it's a bit out of shape and looks more natural. And you can make the holes slightly bigger. But that's the fun part because it just looks totally natural. And I think there was a little pause in the video there. So I'm just starting it all over again. So there may have been a little pause in the video there. So I'm just doing that again. So I'm hoping that worked. If not, it looks like I'm recording all again. So this is what we've got so far. This is our card, just so that you can see that it just works together. And what I'm going to do now is stamp the figure 1 onto my calico. Stamp the figure 1 onto my calico, like so. So I'm just stamping that figure 1 onto my calico. And as you can see, the black shows up a little bit more on the calico. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut that calico just to make sure. There we go. Just cut this just so that it's a better size. Can you see? We've got that in a better size now. So figure 1. And what I'm thinking of doing is this is going to be added here, just on top of the cheesecloth. So I'm just going to add that on top of the cheesecloth. So just take this like so and just add this to here. There we go. So that just adds that to there. And then I've got like a little clip that I can add. So I'm just reaching for my little clips. So I've got little clips somewhere. I'm just looking for those now. Because I think a little clip, one of these little clips will look really good. Just adding that. So I'm just going to add this at the top. Just think that'll look quite nice. Just add it to the top there. Just turn it over, because you've also got this bronze coppery colour here, which will go nicely here. So just adhere that like so. And I just think that coordinates nicely with this, you see, so I quite like that. So let's just move these scissors out of the way. Just move these scissors out of the way. And what was I just thinking then? I was thinking that we might add a little bit of this postmark here, just on the edge from the same stamp set that I was using. So I'm going to use a little bit. Let's see if it'll show up with a little bit of the speckled egg. Even if we can get a little bit of that postmark just showing up. And I'm going to use it as is. I'm not going to use, just blowing that hair, which is great on camera. Just going to add a little bit of that postmark to here. You see, just look at that. Look how lovely that postmark is. I just love how wonderful that postmark is. That is lovely. Just sometimes do that. You're really pleased with what you've created and it's turned out quite nice. I love that. I think it's so nice. So I'm just going to leave that like so. Just move these stamps out of the way. And what I'm going to do then is just add some white splatters. Add some white splatters to my card. I like the white splatters because it just adds a little bit of vibrancy. And I'm probably splattering the phone as well, but hey ho. So I'm just adding a few splatters. I just need to pump that pen a little bit more. There we go. And you know, I'm quite happy with that card. So what we've got, if we pick that up, can you see those mushrooms just pop just against that bundled sage and speckled egg backdrop? And I do love the cheesecloth. I'll definitely have to do that again. So I hope you enjoyed the off-the-cuff video, and I'll probably be back soon with another video with the leftovers. Bye for now.